Okay, so in the last tutorial we auto wired by the constructor. So now here we are having a constructor manager which is accepting three arguments: address 1, address 2 and address 3. All three arguments are of type address, and then each argument value is being assigned to my member variables. And in spring.xml what I have done is, in the manager bean I have used the attribute auto wire and written it over constructor. So now here we are having only one bean that is of type address. So what it does, it assigns these values to my, when it tries to look for the address type of bean, it find only one, so it will assign all these three member variables the same value. So when we'll run it, see, we are getting the first, second and third address as same, and that is the one which I overwritten with the name address 1, because it tries to, what AutoWire by constructor tries to do is, it tries to look for the bean that matches the type address. So it find only one bean, so it will assign the same bean to all the three arguments and then to the appropriate member variables. But if suppose we are having, say, three beans of the same type, address, address and address, so now what this Spring will try to do is, it will check that it's AutoWire by constructor, so it will check the constructor arguments and then see that all the three arguments are of type address. And similarly in spring.xml it's having now three beans of address type, so which to wire to which one, again the ambiguity comes into picture over here. So in this scenario what Spring will do is, it will leave the type and try to now look for the name. So this is how it will work. So when we'll run it, we'll get the first, second and third address as difference, because now when ambiguity is coming over here, in the older Spring versions it used to throw unsatisfied dependency exception, because again the ambiguity was there. But if the newer version of Spring, it will not show you an error, but it will look for the name and then assign it to the appropriate arguments, and you will get the output. Okay, so these are the three types of auto wiring in Spring, that is by name, by type and the constructor. And this is a very important feature. And one more thing, by default if you see, auto wiring is off. Like when we are not using any auto wire attribute in my bean, it means that auto wiring is off and we need to explicitly write the property or the constructor argument to set the member variables of my bean. So that's all about auto wiring in Spring, and we'll see when we'll study about the annotations that we can use the auto wiring in the Spring using the annotation @autowired also. That also works in the similar way it works over here. So before moving on to annotations, let's see the some of the more features of this auto wiring. And one more thing is that in auto wiring, it's not that if you have used the auto wire attribute on the bean, then you cannot use the property sub element. So you can mix the auto and the explicit wiring. This is very important. Just because you choose to auto wire a bean, that doesn't mean you can't explicitly wire some properties. You can still use the property element on any property as if you hadn't set the auto wire. For example, what do I mean by this mixing of the auto wiring and explicit wiring? Here I am having three beans. Let me take the one more member variable like pin code, and then I'll generate getter and setter. Okay, here I'll just simply get pin code. You can copy in all the 3 addresses. Just write the concatenation operator. Okay, so the first 3 values I'm doing it auto wiring. Let's just do it by name. It all depends upon you by which means you want to auto wire. So instead of constructor, I'll do it by name because that's the no ambiguity in that scenario. Okay, now these 3 fields are auto wired because it is looking for the bean name with address 1, address 2 and address 3, but it will try to look for the bean name with pin code. I haven't done it, so what I can do is I can just simply use the property element. So this is the mixing of auto wiring and explicit wiring. That is, some member variables I'm setting using auto wiring and some using so the what's the property name? And let's take a value. Though it's a string, but it's okay. So now when I'm just printing, see, I got the first address, second address and the third address along with the pin code of each address. So it's not that if you're using auto wiring you can't use the explicit wiring. You can still use the explicit wiring. And next is this is all about auto wiring. Next we'll just see that when to auto and when not to auto wire. This is just a theoretical concept. Obviously it looks like that auto wiring is a very powerful way to cut down the amount of manual configurations we were doing when we are writing the bean wiring file, but it can lead to some problems also. For example, now this bean is set to auto wired by name, and so its property will try to look for the bean name address 1, address 2 and address 3. But let's say that you decide at later point of time that I want to rename my property name. I want to just refactor this property and I rename it to some another name. Say I rename it to address 1 underscore new. Oh, it doesn't have the setter and getter methods, that's fine. So when you have changed it, so container will try to do? It will try to auto wire by looking for this bean name auto wire new in my spring.xml, but we haven't changed our spring.xml file. So unless we'll just change this to address 1 underscore new, that is the address 1, it won't find this bean and this property will remain unwired, and when we'll try to use it we'll get the null pointer exception. So it's just that if later point of time some modification is made in my bean class, then you need to change your XML also, because you're doing auto wiring by name. But if you are doing by using property, it will automatically take that because it knows it need to call the setter. At that point also you need to write the name in the property tag. So this is a disadvantage when we comes to auto wiring. And sometimes it can also be like this, that you don't want that this bean should be set to the bean which you have defined in the spring.xml. So there also we set it to some unwanted beans. So at that point of time auto wiring is not so handy, though it's a very powerful tool feature, but depending upon the scenario you need to use it. So that's all about auto wiring. So in the next tutorial we'll study about the annotations which are used in Spring along with the auto wired annotation.